This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
And welcome back to Boomer Life on CIL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton. And in the studio along with me today is Maria Howard, the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society. And we've just spoken with Ellen Allen about a very heartwarming story about being a primary caregiver when you hadn't signed up for that job and looking after your mother, making her adventurous move from Montreal to Vancouver. And now we're going to say hello to another member of the Society's team. This is Barbara Lindsay. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Joanne.
Now, Barbara has actually been with the Alzheimer's Society of BC since 1997. It's a long time. You're also the Director of Advocacy and Education. Now, Barbara is a lawyer whose passion is for people rather than the paperwork. And in her role, she assists Society staff in their work supporting people affected by dementia with their advocacy and legal planning. Barbara's commitment is to ensure that the voices of people with dementia, the caregivers and the families, are all heard.
Great.
Sounds like a great title. You must love what you do.
It's a wonderful job. There's no end to the need, and there's great advances that we're making.
So tell us a little bit about the actual position, and you've just mentioned that we've added education to your title, so this is a new challenge for you. But tell us a little bit about what you actually do.
Exactly. Well, policies make a big difference in people's lives. When we can have a policy that will improve what people can experience and programs can be increased, then we know that we can support more people. When we, in our resource centers, we help one person at a time. That's really our focus in their education programs. We're really supporting people on the journey. But we can change the shape of that journey by improving policies and programs. You can't change the disease progression, but we can change how society supports them, how the health system supports them. So that's the big part of what policy and advocacy is.
And it's part of what you do, the big part. So you actually help to design the policies.
And to influence change. And by using education, so that's a new part, by using education we can increase the impact I think that that policy change can make. And we can, but when people really understand what the disease is and understand how their role can they can use the influence of their role to improve people's lives, and that they can direct and develop programs that actually meet the needs, I think we all win then.
So tell us a little bit about why this topic of today, which is wandering, why would that be so important in the work that you and your team do?
It's an important one because it's a really concern for all of us for safer communities, and we all can have a role in it, in making safer communities and making people safer. I think that and Maria mentioned it earlier, that when it's in the news that a person has wandered, everyone is concerned in the community and feeling like, what can I do? You know, I live in a different community, or what could my role do? And we actually have some ideas about what we can all do.
So have you actually developed some tips for us to help reduce the event of wandering?
Yes, we do. I think that at the Society we have put a lot of attention to wandering. As Maria said, it's quite a number of people with dementia will experience wandering. It's more like 60% of people will have that experience throughout the progression of the disease at some point. And sometimes it can be a challenge, as Maria has identified. And so we really look at it in two ways, really, to learn about as much as you can about wandering, and then to develop a plan.
So what kind of things can we actually do to minimize risk?
To minimize risk. So I think that the big thing is to develop a plan. And at the Alzheimer's Society, we have the Alzheimer's Society of Canada has a partnership with Medical Alert, and so people can get a bracelet which will help identify them if they should be found. So we encourage people to get enrolled into that program. The other thing to do is to develop a plan to really look at what can we do in the circumstances. And if you really follow the routine of the individual to see what is the routine, what are the things that make them anxious, and when would they become concerned or agitated, what are the triggers? So if you can identify what those are, that can help inform you as to things that you can try to change so that they will experience that desire to leave less.
Oh, I see. And Ellen, you were making reference to that with your mom as well, that you noticed if there was too many people in the room, she would start to get anxious, or...
Absolutely.
Yeah, you did see that.
And we did try to redirect, and we did try having the ID bracelets, etc. However, we didn't get any buy-in from my mom because she thought that was not necessary. So you recognize that we are everybody is unique, but
But I think that you worked on developing a strategy that would work for you. And of course, these are all options. And that's why we feel like education is the biggest thing, to show people and families who are experiencing the disease what they can do, and so that they can develop a plan, and then to educate the community about what they can do. And Maria, you mentioned a few, gave some examples about how the community can jump in and help out. And Ellen, that was a great story about the bus driver, because that's what we all hope, that people outside in the community will be able to know what to do, and they knew exactly what to do.
Now, is there a difference between the wandering during the day and wandering at night?
I think it's safety would be the biggest thing, wouldn't it be? Because and quite often, and you mentioned not wearing the right clothes. That's you were concerned about that in Montreal, and that's what we see here. Is we can sometimes you know that the person is not where they should be because you can see how they're dressed. It's inappropriate. And when we talk to people, when we are working on our Dementia Friendly Communities initiative, one of the things we talk about is noticing people around you. And some of the cues that you can get is that people are poorly dressed for the weather. And we really encourage people to gently, just exactly as you said, Ellen, to approach a person and identify yourself and say, I'm Barbara. I'm just wondering if there's anything I can do to help you. And so that you
are you lost, or do you need help?
Do you need help? Yes.
Yeah.
Can I help you get connected, get home? Yeah.
I think there's another myth that goes along with dementia and Alzheimer's, that people who have the disease are physically frail. And there are a number of people who have the disease who are physically frail, but there are a number of people who are really physically fit. So if an individual who's physically fit, and I think, Ellen, you shared this about your mom, decides to go for a walk, they can walk. They're healthy. They can walk. It's not like our assumption that this person might be shuffling down the block, and we can easily track them down. So some of the myths we have about the disease also, impact the way we have to set our strategies up.
What about getting that support from the community, and how do you educate the community?
And that's such a great point, Maria, because I think that the community is going to be thinking about a person with dementia, or a person who's vulnerable, may have those frailties, but people with dementia may very well be hale and hearty looking and maybe even purposeful, but because with dementia they're not able to process and find solutions when they become disoriented. They don't think, okay, well, I'm not going to go down into that ditch because I'm not going to get out of it. They might very well walk down into the ditch. And then so when we're looking for a person with dementia, we sometimes use our own, well, they certainly wouldn't have gone there because they'd get wet or that'd be dangerous. But that's exactly, they can't resolve that. They can't solve that. So
they may not be using logic like we would use logic.
Exactly. That's why we say it's an emergency, because we know that people can't problem solve the way that we might.
And we take a lot of that for granted as well. So would you recommend that if there was a member with Alzheimer's Society living in our home or in our community, would we tell our neighbors? Should we tell our neighbors? Should we tell the police? Should we tell the...
Well, we consider that part of the plan, is really to help your neighbors know. And it sounds like you did that, Ellen, like your neighbors and your mom's neighbors in Montreal were really aware. And it was only when they became, when it became more than they could really manage, that's when they called you. And I think that for neighbors to know is so important, because if they noticed that your mom was wandering down the street, if they had your number, they could call right away if they knew that wasn't exactly what she should be doing by herself.
Wow. And Maria, you mentioned right at the top of this show that this is really quite a common problem. You get asked a lot of questions about this when people connect with you through First Link. It's a common question. It's a common concern.
I think it's a question that is the top of people's minds when their family has recently received a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. And I think people are often hesitant to ask about it. And so, as Barbara was suggesting, through education, we want to reach out to people and start the conversation. And starting a conversation as early as possible is always the best strategy to make a difference, because often what we hope is that the person who has been diagnosed can still participate in the conversation and participate in the solution and the strategies, which really does help address many of the issues later on.
That's such a great example, because we have a volunteer who wears a little placard around him to say that I have dementia, and it's quite okay to ask me for help, ask if I need help. And not everyone is comfortable with doing that. That's the problem. Not everyone feels, but if you are able to participate in the planning, then you then you can bring in your own awareness and your own. It is an individual. We need to approach people individually and respectfully.
I think that's one of the points that I'll take home with me today, that everybody has a very unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to someone that does wander, what's the policy and what's the plan that's in place?
And the first thing is to call the police, as was mentioned earlier. That's the important thing.
It is an emergency.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then, of course, then look around and see if there's any clues in the house that you can use to figure out what they were wearing. If you have a recent picture, to let the police have that picture. That's important. And to let them know if there's any areas that they might potentially go. I know I was talking to the police not long ago, and he said that they got this description from a person. He said that could have been anyone in the community, and then they said his favorite haunt is the library, and he said we went right to the library and we found him right away. And so that can be a really important cue.
Sure. What are their habits? What are they familiar with? You know, are they obsessed with children? You might find them at a park or that type of thing. So know your individual and know your environment as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some great insight from Barbara Lindsay, the Director of Advocacy and Education with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. We're going to continue this conversation about the journey of dementia in a few moments, but if you ever have any questions or need more information about these topics, please visit the website www.alzheimerbc.org. This is Boomer Life on CIAL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIAL 650.